Evening, folks. Gather close now. Let the shadows lengthen. Joe Rivers here, back with you on Voices of Justice. Tonight, tonight we're venturing deep into the heart of the Arizona Territory, back in the years following the war between the states. A land of stark beauty and brutal truths, where the sun bleaches bone and memory alike, and the mountains hold secrets older than any map. Out there, the line between survival and extinction was thin as a knife edge, drawn across cracked earth and shadowed canyons. It was a place where cultures clashed like thunderheads, where understanding was scarce and violence was commonplace. We often talk about loss on the frontier: loss of fortune, loss of hope, loss of life. But sometimes, the deepest losses are the ones that sever the ties of blood, leaving wounds that fester for years under that relentless sun. Imagine a man haunted by such a loss, carrying grief like a second shadow. He's tracking not riches, not revenge in the usual sense, but maybe just an answer, a finality to a pain that won't fade. Then, imagine him finding himself in the heart of what he fears most, captive to the very people history painted as his enemies. But the West, folks, she had a way of turning expectations inside out like a poorly stitched glove. What happens when the face of the enemy becomes terrifyingly, impossibly familiar? Tonight's story is about a man named Ethan Cole, captured by Apaches in the high desert. He expected hardship, maybe death. What he discovered, well, it challenged everything he thought he knew about family, identity, and the very meaning of brotherhood. Stay with me as we explore a bond forged in childhood, shattered by violence, and rediscovered in the most unlikely, dangerous circumstances imaginable. The arrow struck Ethan Cole's canteen with a violent thunk, splitting the metal, sending precious water spraying uselessly onto the parched Arizona sand. He didn't need to look back. He knew. Apache. He spurred his exhausted horse, Bess, digging his heels in, urging her into a desperate, stumbling gallop through the maze of sun-baked boulders and thorny scrub. Another arrow hissed past his ear, embedding itself in the pommel of his saddle. Too close. He risked a glance over his shoulder. 3 riders, lean and copper-skinned, moving with the fluid grace of the landscape itself, their ponies seeming to float over the treacherous ground that hampered Bess. They weren't shouting war cries, they were silent, deadly, efficient. Hunters closing in on their prey. And he, Ethan Cole, former Union cavalry sergeant, now just a man searching for ghosts in a hostile land, was the prey. Fear, cold, and sharp, clawed at his throat, but beneath it simmered the old, familiar anger. Apaches. The word itself was a curse on his tongue, synonymous with the terror that had ripped his life apart 15 years ago. The smoky, bloody dawn raid on their small homestead near the Gila River. His parents, cut down before his eyes. And Daniel, his younger brother, Daniel. Just 10 years old, blonde hair bright against the dust, dragged away screaming into the chaos, vanishing like smoke. Ethan, only 16 himself, but already strong, had fought back, taken a crippling blow to the leg that left him with a permanent limp. and watched helplessly as his world ended. They'd told him later Daniel was surely dead, killed quickly, or tortured. No child survived Apache captivity, they'd said. Better to think of him gone. Ethan had tried. He'd fought in the war, trying to bury the grief under smoke and fury. He'd drifted west afterwards, working cattle drives, scouting for the army briefly, always pushing deeper into Apache territory, drawn by a morbid fascination, a need to understand the force that had destroyed his family, and maybe, just maybe, a sliver of hope too foolish to voice. Find some trace, some confirmation of Daniel's fate. He carried the guilt of survival, the phantom weight of his lost brother every single day. It had led him here, alone, tracking rumors of a specific Apache band known for raiding near the border, the Chiricahua, led by a chief spoken of with particular fear and respect by soldiers and settlers alike. He wasn't sure what he hoped to find. Revenge felt hollow now. Answers? Perhaps. Closure? Unlikely in this unforgiving land. Bess stumbled, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The Apache riders were flanking him now, cutting off his escape. One warrior, face streaked with black paint, raised his rifle. Ethan knew it was over. He reined Bess in, the exhausted horse shuddering beneath him. He wouldn't die running like a scared rabbit. He slowly raised his hands, his heart pounding a heavy, fatalistic rhythm against his ribs. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the fear, directed at these warriors, at the fate that had brought him here, at the memory of Daniel's stolen future. The Apache riders surrounded him, their faces impassive, obsidian eyes studying him, taking in his worn clothes, his army-issue Colt still holstered, the slight limp as he stiffly dismounted. They didn't speak, just motioned with their rifles. One took Bess's reins. Another efficiently relieved Ethan of his Colt, knife, and remaining supplies. His hands were bound tightly behind his back with rawhide thongs that bit into his wrists. He braced himself for brutality, for the killing blow. Instead, they simply nudged him forward, forcing him to walk, his limp making the trek over the rocky ground agonizing. They moved with incredible speed and silence, melting back into the canyons and arroyos, leaving the place of his capture as empty as if they had never been there. He was captive, prisoner of the people he despised most, the people who represented the source of his life's deepest wound. As they marched him deeper into the rugged mountains, under a sun that offered no mercy, Ethan felt a despair colder than any desert night descend upon him. He hadn't found answers. He'd found the end of the trail, likely a brutal and terrifying one. He closed his eyes, the image of Daniel's terrified face 15 years ago searing itself behind his eyelids. "I'm sorry, Danny," he thought. "I couldn't save you then, and I couldn't even find you now." The journey to the Apache stronghold, their hidden rancheria, was a brutal education in endurance and the harsh realities of the land Ethan had only ever skirted. They traveled for what felt like days, though time blurred under the relentless sun and the constant ache in his leg. They moved mostly at night or twilight, resting during the worst heat in hidden caves or beneath rocky overhangs, leaving almost no trace of their passage. His captors treated him with a rough indifference, not outright cruelty, but no kindness either. They gave him minimal water, barely enough food, strips of dried meat tougher than leather to keep him moving. They ignored his pained gasps as his bad leg throbbed, pushing him onward relentlessly. He learned quickly that complaining was useless, defiance suicidal. He focused on observing, the old cavalry scout instincts kicking in despite his despair. He noted landmarks, the direction of the sun, the subtle signs of water sources. He watched his captors. They weren't the disorganized savages of frontier myth. They moved with purpose, discipline. They communicated with hand signals, soft clicks of the tongue, rarely speaking aloud. They knew this land intimately, every hidden spring, every defensible canyon, every game trail. He saw moments of camaraderie between them, a shared joke in their own tongue, a quick exchange about the condition of the horses. He saw one warrior carefully re-splinting the broken wing of a small hawk they found, handling it with surprising gentleness before placing it carefully in the shade. These small moments chipped away, almost imperceptibly, at the monolithic wall of hatred he'd built around their image. They were warriors, yes, fierce and dangerous, but they were also men. Finally, after a grueling climb through a narrow, easily defended pass, they arrived. The rancheria wasn't a haphazard camp, but a small, well-hidden village nestled in a high mountain valley, blessed with water and grass. Wickiups, domed shelters made of brush and hide, dotted the valley floor near a clear, cold stream. Horses grazed peacefully in a makeshift corral woven from branches. Smoke rose from cooking fires, carrying the scent of roasting meat and herbs. Children played near the stream, their laughter echoing strangely in the quiet air, while women went about their tasks, grinding corn, tanning hides, mending clothes. It was a scene of surprising domesticity, jarringly different from the images of terror his grief had conjured for 15 years. His arrival caused an immediate stir. The children stopped playing, staring with wide, curious eyes. The women paused in their work, their expressions guarded, some openly hostile. The warriors who had captured him led him towards the center of the camp, where several older, important-looking men sat conferring near a larger wickiup. Ethan felt hundreds of eyes on him, stripping him bare. He was the enemy, the White Eye, the Pinda Likoyi, brought into their sanctuary. He expected to be interrogated, tortured, killed. Instead, he was simply shoved down onto the hard-packed earth near a sturdy pine tree, his hands still bound. His captors spoke briefly to the seated men, gesturing towards Ethan. There were nods, more guttural conversation in the Apache tongue he didn't understand. Then his captors dispersed, leaving him alone under the watchful eyes of the entire village. No one approached him. No one spoke to him. He was simply there, ignored, yet intensely observed. Days turned into a strange, disorienting routine. He remained tied near the tree, though his bonds were occasionally loosened slightly to allow for painful circulation. He was given food and water twice a day, usually a thin corn mush or leftover scraps of roasted rabbit or deer, brought by an older woman with eyes that held no malice, only a deep, ancient sadness. He watched the life of the village unfold around him. He saw the warriors training, practicing with bows, rifles, knives, their movements economical and deadly. He saw the women working, their hands constantly busy, their role clearly vital to the survival of the band. He saw the children learning, mimicking the adults, absorbing the skills and traditions of their people. He saw rituals performed, prayers chanted to unseen spirits, respect paid to the elders. He learned snippets of their language, picking up words for water, tu, fire, ko, horse, geh. He learned the names of a few people who interacted near him. One stern warrior, who seemed to harbor particular animosity towards Ethan, was called Taza. The quiet, sad-eyed woman who brought him food was Ilsa N. He saw children playing games remarkably similar to ones he'd played as a boy. It was profoundly unsettling, humanizing the people he'd spent half his life hating. His ingrained prejudice warred constantly with the evidence of his own eyes. They were Apache, the raiders who had destroyed his family, yet they were also mothers, fathers, children, living complex lives in a harsh world, defending their homes, their families, their way of life against encroaching forces, including men like him. One figure, however, remained mostly aloof, yet undeniably central: the chief. Ethan saw him infrequently at first. When he did appear, a hush fell over the camp. He moved with quiet authority, his presence commanding instant respect. He wasn't the oldest man, perhaps only slightly older than Ethan himself, but his bearing was that of a seasoned leader. He was tall for an Apache, lean but powerfully built, his features sharp, intelligent, his eyes a piercing, unnervingly light shade, almost gray-blue, a startling contrast to his sun-darkened skin and long, dark hair. He wore simple buckskins, like the other warriors, distinguished only by a single eagle feather tied in his hair and the palpable aura of command surrounding him. Ethan heard the warriors refer to him as Nantan, the chief, but also sometimes by a name that sounded like Nakia, meaning he who overcomes, or survivor. Whenever Nakia passed near where Ethan was tied, those strange light eyes would linger on him for a moment, an unreadable expression in their depths: curiosity, contempt, assessment. Ethan felt a prickle of unease under that gaze, something beyond the natural fear of a captive for his captor. There was an intensity there, a searching quality that made Ethan shift uncomfortably. He told himself it was just the arrogance of a powerful chief inspecting his prize. Weeks crawled by. Ethan's physical condition slowly improved despite the meager rations. His body, hardened by years of rough living, adapted. His legs still pained him, especially in the cold mountain nights, but the constant walking had, oddly, strengthened it somewhat. Mentally, however, he was adrift. Hope of escape seemed non-existent. The rancheria was too well hidden, too well guarded. His hatred for the Apache had become confused, muddied by his observations. His grief for Daniel remained a raw, open wound, exacerbated by the presence of Apache children who were Daniel's age when he was taken. One sweltering afternoon, a commotion arose near the stream. A young boy, perhaps 7 or 8, had slipped on wet rocks while chasing a lizard and fallen into a deeper pool, struggling against the current. Before the nearby women could react, Ethan saw the chief, Nakia, who had been conferring with warriors nearby, move with astonishing speed. He dove into the water without hesitation, surfaced with the sputtering boy, and brought him safely to the bank, performing a quick, efficient check to ensure the child hadn't swallowed too much water before handing him over to his frantic mother. It was the speed, the unthinking, immediate reaction to save the child that struck Ethan. But something else snagged his attention as Nakia straightened up, water sluicing from his bare torso before he reached for his tunic. On the chief's left shoulder blade, partially obscured by wet hair, was a scar. Not a battle scar, but a jagged, crescent-shaped mark, identical to the scar Daniel had gotten years ago when he'd fallen from the big oak tree behind their cabin while trying to retrieve a kite. Ethan's breath hitched. His heart hammered against his ribs. It couldn't be. Scars could be similar. It was impossible. Daniel was dead, killed 15 years ago. This man was Apache, a chief, hardened, respected, his skin darkened by years under the desert sun. But the scar, it was identical. The shape, the placement. Nakia seemed to feel Ethan's intense stare. He turned slowly, his wet hair plastered to his neck, revealing the scar more clearly for a fleeting moment before he pulled on his tunic. Those light, piercing eyes met Ethan's across the short distance, and in that instant, Ethan saw something flicker deep within them. Not the impassive gaze of a chief, but a flash of startled recognition, quickly suppressed, replaced by a guarded, almost fearful intensity. The world tilted. The sounds of the camp, the crying child being comforted, the women's chatter, the warriors' low voices, faded into a dull roar in Ethan's ears. The sun beat down, but he felt ice cold. He stared at the Apache chief, at the man called Nakia, the survivor, and saw not an enemy, not a savage, but the ghost of his 10-year-old brother, somehow miraculously alive, standing before him, transformed into the very thing that had destroyed their family. The twist wasn't just unexpected, it was impossible, shattering the foundations of Ethan's grief, his hatred, his entire understanding of the world. His brother wasn't dead. He was here. And he was the Nantan of the Chiricahua band that held him captive. The revelation hung between them, unspoken yet deafening, across the sun-drenched clearing. Ethan stared, unable to process the cataclysmic shift in his reality. Daniel, alive, an Apache chief, the architect of his family's destruction, the object of his lifelong grief and hatred, was his brother. Nakia, Daniel, held Ethan's gaze for another charged second, his face an unreadable mask, though Ethan thought he saw a tremor in the hands that fastened his tunic. Then the chief turned abruptly and strode away towards his wickiup, disappearing inside, leaving Ethan tethered to the tree, his mind reeling, his world irrevocably fractured. The hours that followed were a blur of confusion, disbelief, and a grief so profound it threatened to suffocate him. Every certainty he'd clung to for 15 years crumbled. Daniel wasn't the innocent victim, eternally frozen in memory. He was this man, this leader, this Apache. How? How had he survived? How had he become one of them? Anger warred with a disorienting surge of hope, immediately followed by the bitter taste of betrayal. Had Daniel forgotten? Did he not recognize Ethan? Or worse, did he recognize him and choose to remain silent, choosing his adopted people over his own blood? That night, long after the campfires had died down and the rancheria lay silent under a canopy of stars, the flap of Nakia's wickiup opened. The chief emerged, moving silently through the sleeping camp, stopping directly in front of Ethan. In the pale moonlight, his features seemed softer, younger. The harsh lines of command momentarily eased, revealing a vulnerability Ethan hadn't seen before. He knelt, drawing a knife. Ethan tensed, expecting the final blow. Instead, Nakia swiftly, expertly cut the rawhide bonds securing Ethan to the tree. He didn't cut the bonds on his wrists. He spoke, not in Apache, but in heavily accented, slightly hesitant English, words clearly unused for a long time. You know, it wasn't a question. Ethan could only nod, his throat tight. The scar, he managed, his voice raspy. Daniel? The chief flinched at the name, a spasm of pain crossing his features before the mask of the Nanton slipped back into place. That name died long ago. With the family, with the past. His voice was low, rough. I am Nakia. How? Ethan choked out. How did you survive? Everyone said you were killed. Nakia looked away towards the dark mountains, his gaze distant. The warriors who took me, one lost his own son days before. He saw something in me, not pity, usefulness, perhaps. He spared me. His wife. She had no children left. She took me in. He spoke haltingly, dredging up memories long buried. I learned the language, learned the ways, became Apache. It was the only way to live. Become Apache? Ethan echoed, bitterness rising. They killed our parents, Daniel. I know what they did. Nakia snapped back, the chief's authority flashing in his eyes. Now filled with a familiar fire Ethan recognized from their childhood arguments. I saw it too, but I also saw my adopted father killed by bluecoat soldiers years later. I saw women and children hunted like animals. This world, Pinda world and Apache world, there is killing on both sides. There is loss on both sides. He took a deep breath, visibly regaining control. I survived. I proved myself. I became Nanton to protect these people. My people now. The finality in his voice, the clear demarcation. These people, my people, struck Ethan harder than any physical blow. So you choose them? Over your own blood? Nakia looked at Ethan, and for the first time, Ethan saw not a chief, not a stranger, but the deep, undeniable conflict in his brother's eyes. Blood, Nakia murmured. What is blood? The family that raised me here. They are my blood now, too. You are a ghost from a life I buried. Yet, the fact that he was here, speaking English, acknowledging the connection, betrayed his words. He was torn. I tracked this band because Ethan hesitated, the original purpose seeming distant now, because I needed to know what happened. To you. Now you know, Nakia said flatly. I live as Apache. He rose to his feet. You being here, it is a danger. To me, to my people. Taza. He nodded towards the stern warrior who distrusted Ethan. He watches you. He suspects you are Army Scout. He suspects me because I let you live this long. Why did you? Ethan asked, searching his brother's face. Why let me live? Nakia didn't answer immediately. He looked up at the stars, countless and cold in the desert sky. Perhaps, perhaps even a ghost deserves water before he returns to the dust. He turned back, his face hardening again. Stay quiet. Do nothing foolish. Your fate is not decided yet. He turned and walked back to his wickiup, leaving Ethan with his wrists still bound, but his mind and heart unleashed in a storm of conflicting emotions, far more binding than any rawhide. The fragile, dangerous truce held for several days. Ethan remained a captive, though Nakia ordered his wrist bonds loosened slightly. He was watched constantly, especially by the suspicious Taza and his followers. Nakia kept his distance, interacting with Ethan only through brief, assessing glances across the camp. Yet, the knowledge hung between them, an invisible, high-tension wire. Ethan wrestled with his feelings, anger at Daniel's assimilation, grief for the brother lost not to death, but to a different life, and a strange, unwelcome empathy for the burden Nakia carried, caught between two worlds. The tension within the band grew palpable. Whispers followed Nakia. Warriors loyal to Taza watched their chief with narrowed eyes. They saw his hesitation regarding the white captive, the shared language overheard by some near the tree that night, the chief's unusual preoccupation. The presence of a white man, especially one who seemed to have a strange connection to their Nantan, in their hidden stronghold, was deeply unsettling. Factions began to quietly form. The outside world intruded abruptly a few days later. An Apache scout, riding hard, arrived with urgent news. Inda, enemy Apache, likely scouts from a rival band or possibly mescaleros infringing on their territory, had been spotted near the southern pass, the main entrance to their hidden valley. Immediately, the rancheria shifted from quiet unease to disciplined readiness. Nakia emerged, instantly resuming command, his internal conflict seemingly vanishing beneath the weight of his responsibility. He issued orders quickly, decisively. Warriors grabbed weapons, checked horses. Women secured the children and supplies, preparing for defense or flight. Taza, his face grim, rallied his own group of warriors, conferring briefly with Nakia. Despite their distrust, the immediate threat demanded unity. Nakia paused near Ethan. "There is danger coming," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Fighting. If my people lose, you die with us. If we win, your presence here is still a problem." He looked Ethan directly in the eye. "If you wish to survive this day, you may have to fight for us." He drew his knife again, and this time sliced through the bonds on Ethan's wrists. He hesitated, then retrieved Ethan's own Colt Peacemaker from his wickiup and thrust it into Ethan's hand. "Your choice, brother?" He didn't wait for an answer, turning to direct the defense, leaving Ethan standing free for the first time in weeks, the familiar weight of his Colt in his hand, facing an impossible decision. Help the Apache, his brother's people, the historical enemies who had killed his parents, or stand aside, hope for their defeat, which likely meant his own death, or recapture by potentially even more hostile forces. His past hatred warred with his present reality, with the undeniable fact that the leader of these people, the man whose life was now on the line, was Daniel. The battle for the valley was about to begin, but the fiercest battle was raging within Ethan Cole himself. The Apache warriors melted into the rocks and scrub surrounding the narrow pass, positions chosen with practiced skill, rifles and bows ready. Nakia directed the defense from a rocky outcrop overlooking the entrance, Taza and his men holding the opposite flank. Ethan, his Colt feeling heavy and alien yet strangely comforting in his hand, found himself near Nakia's position, instinctively seeking cover behind a cluster of boulders. His mind was a whirlwind. Fight? For them? Against other Apache? The absurdity, the impossibility of it warred with the primal instinct to survive and the deeply buried, newly resurrected connection to the man commanding the defense. Daniel. The attack came suddenly, not with a full charge, but with probing shots echoing from the canyon below, testing the defenses. Nakia's warriors answered sparingly, conserving ammunition, revealing their positions only when necessary. Ethan watched Nakia, saw the calm focus, the way he read the terrain, anticipated the enemy's moves, issued quiet commands that were instantly obeyed. This wasn't just Daniel playing chief. This was a skilled, experienced leader protecting his people. The rival Apache scouts, finding the pass strongly held, pressed harder. Figures darted between rocks below, closer now. Arrows arched through the air. A Chiricahua warrior near Taza cried out, clutching his arm. The fight intensified, the sharp crack of rifles echoing off the canyon walls. Ethan remained behind his boulder, a spectator in a battle that felt both intimately personal and completely alien. He saw Taza's warriors repelling a flanking attempt, saw Nakia calmly direct fire to suppress the main assault. He saw the desperation and determination on both sides. Then, disaster struck. A well-aimed shot from below caught the warrior beside Nakia, sending him tumbling from the outcrop. In the same instant, 3 enemy warriors, using the distraction, broke from cover and scrambled up a less guarded section of the slope, heading directly towards Nakia's now exposed position. Nakia spun, bringing his rifle up, dropping the first attacker. But the other 2 kept coming, knives drawn, closing the distance rapidly. Taza and his men were too far away, pinned down by fire from below, to intervene in time. Nakia fired again, hitting the second attacker, but the third man, yelling a war cry, lunged, tackling Nakia before he could bring his rifle to bear again. They tumbled together, Nakia's rifle clattering away, locked in a life-or-death struggle with knives flashing near the cliff edge. Ethan saw it happen in a fraction of a second. He saw his brother, Daniel, about to be overwhelmed. 15 years of hatred, grief, and confusion evaporated in a single, clarifying instant. He didn't think. He reacted. He burst from behind his boulder, raising his Colt. The third attacker had Nakia pinned, knife raised for a killing blow. Ethan fired. Once, twice. The attacker arched back, then collapsed. Nakia shoved the body aside, scrambling for his rifle, breathing hard. He looked up, saw Ethan standing there, Colt smoking. Their eyes met again across the battlefield, across the chasm of years and cultures. Surprise, shock, and something else. A grudging, dawning understanding. The brief, Intense struggle at the command post seemed to break the back of the assault. Seeing their comrades fall, the remaining attackers hesitated, then began a ragged retreat back down the canyon, pursued by sporadic fire from Nakia's victorious warriors. The immediate danger passed. The silence that felt heavy, punctuated only by the groans of the wounded and the calls of warriors checking the perimeter. Nakia slowly got to his feet, retrieved his rifle, and walked over to Ethan. He stopped a few feet away, his face unreadable again, but the intensity in his light eyes was palpable. Taza and several other warriors approached cautiously, their expressions wary, suspicious, glancing from Ethan's Colt back to their chief. "You saved my life," Nakia stated, his voice low, flat. Ethan nodded numbly, lowering his gun. "He was going to kill you." Taza stepped forward, speaking rapidly in Apache, gesturing angrily towards Ethan, then towards Nakia. Though Ethan didn't understand the words, the meaning was clear. Why is this white man armed? Why did he fight? He cannot be trusted. Nakia listened impassively, then silenced Taza with a sharp gesture. He looked back at Ethan, a long, searching look. "You fought," he said, switching back to English. "For us." "Why?" Ethan struggled for words, the turmoil inside him still raging. I don't know," he admitted honestly. Maybe blood is thicker than 15 years of hate. Maybe you're still my brother." The admission hung in the air. Nakia's face remained impassive, but something flickered deep in his eyes. Pain, conflict, a connection he couldn't deny. Taza spat on the ground, disgusted, but held his tongue under Nakia's steady gaze. "The Inda are retreating," Nakia announced, turning his attention back to his duties, the moment of personal revelation seemingly pushed aside. "But they may return. We must see to the wounded, strengthen the watch." He paused, then looked back at Ethan, a final command in his voice. "You stay close. We are not finished." The battle was won, but the war for understanding, for acceptance, for the future of two brothers torn between worlds had just begun. Ethan had crossed the line, defending the very people he'd set out to confront, saving the life of the brother he thought lost forever. The consequences of that act, for himself, for Nakia, and for the Chiricahua band, remained dangerously uncertain. In the days following the skirmish, a subtle shift occurred in the rancheria. Ethan was no longer just the captive, the enemy. He was the white man who had fought alongside them, who had saved the Nanton's life. While Taza and his faction remained deeply suspicious, viewing Ethan's actions as some kind of trick, or, at best, a temporary alignment of convenience, others looked at him with a grudging respect, or at least confusion. The women, including Ilsa-en, offered him slightly larger portions of food. Children sometimes stared at him with open curiosity instead of fear. He was still an outsider, still fundamentally Pinda, but he was no longer entirely alien. Nakia, burdened by leadership and the simmering internal conflict Ethan's presence exacerbated, kept his distance publicly. But one evening, he appeared at Ethan's sleeping spot, no longer tethered, but still watched. He carried 2 steaming cups of herbal tea. He handed one to Ethan, then sat cross-legged on the ground nearby, a silence stretching between them, thick with unspoken questions. Taza demands your death, Nakia said finally, staring into his cup. He says you know the location of the rancheria, says you are a spy, says your presence weakens my leadership, divides the people. Ethan sipped the hot, bitter tea. And what do you say, Nantan? Nakia looked up, his light eyes troubled. I say, I say you saved my life. There is a debt. He paused. I also say, you look at me and see Daniel. I look at you and see the brother I watched grieve from the shadows when they took me. I see the world that hunted us, that killed the only other family I knew. It wasn't your fault, Dan. Nakia, Ethan said softly. None of it. Fault? Nakia gave a short, harsh laugh. There is enough fault on both sides to fill this canyon, but fault does not change reality. I am Nakia, leader of this band. You are Ethan Cole, brother of a ghost, a white man in an Apache camp. There is no place for you here, and perhaps no place for me if you stay. The brutal honesty struck Ethan. His brother was right. Their reunion, miraculous as it was, created an impossible situation. So what happens now? I do not know, Nakia admitted, a rare vulnerability showing. Taza presses for a council. He will demand your execution. Many will support him. Fear of the white man runs deep, for good reason. Others, they respect the life debt. They are confused. He looked directly at Ethan. There may be only one way. You leave. Disappear. Forget you found this place. Forget you found me. Leave? After 15 years of searching, after finding his brother alive, just turn around and walk away? Pretend none of it happened? The thought felt like another kind of death. And you? Ethan asked. Can you just forget? Nakia's jaw tightened. I am Nantan. I have responsibilities. He didn't answer the question directly, but his eyes gave him away. Forgetting wouldn't be easy for him either. Before they could speak further, a warrior ran up, breathing hard, speaking urgently to Nakia in Apache. Nakia listened intently, his face growing grim. He stood up abruptly. The Inda, he said to Ethan. They did not fully retreat. Scouts report a larger war party gathering south of the pass. They mean to take this valley. He turned, instantly the decisive leader again, shouting orders, rallying his warriors. The brief moment of personal reckoning was over, swallowed by the immediate threat of annihilation. The second battle was fiercer, more desperate than the first. The rival band attacked in force, determined to breach the pass. Nakia led the defense brilliantly, moving constantly, encouraging his warriors, anticipating enemy thrusts. Ethan, without hesitation this time, fought alongside them. He wasn't fighting for the Apache way of life, perhaps, but he was fighting for these specific people, fighting beside his brother, fighting for their survival against a common enemy. His Colt spoke alongside the Apache rifles and bows, his cavalry training providing a steady, disciplined fire. He saw Taza fight with savage bravery, defending his flank, his earlier animosity seemingly forgotten in the heat of battle. He saw Ilsan and other women bringing water and ammunition to the warriors, risking their own lives. He saw the fierce unity of a people defending their home. During a lull, as the attackers regrouped below, Nakia found Ethan reloading behind the same cluster of boulders. You fight well, Ethan Cole. Nakia said, a hint of grudging admiration in his voice. Learned in a different war, Ethan replied grimly. Perhaps all wars are the same, Nakia murmured. He looked down at the canyon, his face taut with strain. They are too many. We cannot hold the pass forever. Just then, Taza ran over, speaking urgently to Nakia, pointing back towards the rancheria. Nakia cursed softly in Apache. They found another way, he translated for Ethan, his voice tight. A goat trail over the east ridge. Some warriors have slipped past our flank, heading for the camp, for the women and children. Nakia instantly detailed Taza and half the warriors to hold the main pass, then gathered the remaining fighters, including Ethan. We must intercept them. Now. They raced back through the scattered wiki-ups, hearing the first sounds of panicked shouting from the far side of the camp. They met the infiltrators near the horse corral, a dozen desperate enemy warriors breaking through the brush. A chaotic, close-quarters fight erupted among the shelters. Ethan found himself back-to-back with Nakia, firing into the swirling melee. An enemy warrior lunged at Nakia with a knife. Ethan shot him down. Another charged Ethan. Nakia felled him with his war club. For a few frantic moments, they were not white man and Apache chief, but simply brothers, fighting together, protecting each other, as they might have done 15 years ago against a different kind of threat. They beat back the attack, the surviving infiltrators fleeing back towards the ridge, leaving several dead among the wiki-ups. But the cost was high. Several Chiricahua warriors were down, wounded, or dead. And among them, lying near the stream where he had tried to rally a defense, was Taza, grievously wounded, an arrow protruding from his chest. Nakia knelt beside his rival, his face etched with pain. Taza looked up at his chief. Then his gaze shifted to Ethan, standing nearby. Taza whispered something in Apache. Nakia listened, then nodded slowly. Taza's eyes closed. Nakia stood up, turning to Ethan. He said the white man fought like Apache. He said, perhaps, the spirits work in ways we do not understand. He looked at Ethan. The weight of command, of loss, heavy on his shoulders. He is dead. The victory felt hollow. They had defended their home, but they were weakened, vulnerable. And the impossible question of Ethan and Nakia's relationship remained unresolved, now complicated further by shared battle and acknowledged debts. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the blood-stained valley, Nakia made his decision. He gathered his people, addressed them briefly, his voice carrying the weight of authority and loss. Then he walked over to Ethan. You cannot stay, Nakia said, his voice final. Your presence here, it invites danger from your world and creates division within mine. And I cannot be both Daniel and Nakia. He gestured towards the pass. Take your horse. Ride north. Do not look back. Live your life, Ethan Cole. Ethan looked at his brother, saw the immense burden he carried, the sacrifice he was making. Leaving now felt like abandoning him all over again. And you? What life will you live? A faint, sad smile touched Nakia's lips. I will live as Nantan. I will lead my people. I will try to survive. It is the only life I know. He stepped closer, and for a moment, the chief's mask slipped entirely. He gripped Ethan's shoulder, a brief, hard pressure. Go safely, brother. Then he turned, walking back towards his people, towards the waiting council fires, leaving Ethan standing alone with his horse, his freedom, and a heart filled with a complex mixture of grief, relief, and a profound, aching sense of connection to the brother and the world he had to leave behind. He mounted Bess, turned her north, and rode out of the hidden valley, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of blood and gold, leaving the Apache world and the ghost of Daniel behind him in the shadows. Sound of gentle, reflective harmonica music begins to swell softly under Joe Rivers' voice. Joe Rivers, Ethan Cole, went looking for closure, for an end to 15 years of grief and anger. He found something far more complicated, didn't he? Found his brother, Daniel, not dead, but alive, transformed, leading the very people Ethan had blamed for his family's destruction. Captured by Apaches, he discovered their chief was the white brother he thought was dead. Talk about a twist of fate only the western frontier could deliver. What a tangle of identity, loyalty, and blood. Ethan, forced to confront his own hatred, seeing the humanity, the struggle, the complex life of his brother's adopted people. And Daniel, or Nakia, caught between two worlds, the ghost of his past rising up in the heart of his present responsibilities, forced to choose between blood ties and the people who saved him, raised him, made him their leader. They found each other across a divide wider than any canyon, a divide carved by violence, misunderstanding, and years of separation. Their story, it digs deep, don't it? Makes us question what truly defines family. Is it blood alone? Or is it shared experience, loyalty, the ties forged in the fire of survival? Makes us think about identity. Are we defined by where we came from or who we become? Ethan had to learn that hate is a blindfold, preventing us from seeing the complex truths of others' lives, even the lives of those we think we should despise. Nakia had to carry the weight of two pasts, two identities, finding a way to honor both while leading his people forward. Out there, on that harsh frontier, lines weren't always clear. Enemies could become kin, brothers could be strangers, and survival often meant making impossible choices. The greatest discovery sometimes wasn't gold or land, but a deeper understanding of the human heart in all its tangled complexity. Does Ethan and Nakia's story resonate with you? Does it make you think about the divides in our own world, the bridges we need to build? If this tale touched you, share it. Let these voices of struggle, resilience, and unexpected connection be heard, and be sure to subscribe to Voices of Justice for more stories that explore the heart and soul of the American West. Until next time, this is Joe Rivers, wishing you the courage to face your own frontiers and the wisdom to recognize family wherever you may find it. Keep listening for the voices, 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 for the voices.